All right, so in this video, we're going to cover just a little bit about what CRUD stands for. Okay, this is the CRUD video. Okay, so for CRUD, it stands for Create, Read, Update, and Delete. So we want a website that can CRUD. We want to be able to create, insert a new record. We want to be able to read. Here's our read, new record. We want to be able to update an existing record, and we want to be able to delete a record. Okay. In the last video, we talked about doing the read. Okay. So in the route itself, we have a method called get and post. Get and post matters if the method that it's how we click on the link, right? So if we click on a link and then we click on a button and the button's in a form, that becomes a post. So if we open a form, so on our page, on our samples page, if we have a button and we're on the page and we click the button to add, it's going to feed back itself right back onto this same route. And when it does, it's going to be if this posted, it's going to grab the first name and the last name, which actually this is not first name, last name. This is actually sample name and sample size. So we'll change that to sample name and sample size. Okay. And here we'll just do the same thing. Sample name and sample size. Okay. And then we'll insert into, so here's sample name, sample size. Okay. And we'll come over here. Let's just minimize this. And we'll grab name and we'll grab size. And notice how sample size is grayed out and last name is underlined red. Because sample size is grayed out, that means it's not been used yet. So if we open it or if we double click it, we paste it over here. Now it went all the way dark. Okay. And that's not red anymore. Okay. So that's very important. So we posted, we just clicked the button. It's going to grab out of that HTML file the name and the sample size. It's going to put them in these variables. We're going to come down here and we're going to execute this insert into the samples, and we make sure that's the right name, and it is name, and it puts in those two values. Okay. This value is going to go into this one. This value is going to go into this one. Then, very important, you have to commit. If you execute it, this right here is pushing the apply button. Okay. Then we'll say new sample added and success, and it redirects us back to sample. It comes back up, hits this as a get method, and comes right back down and runs the whole select. That's how it works. Okay. Now, for the update, I like update sample, update sample. I like it singular here, and I like update to be first. Okay. For the naming standard. Then over here, this is the variable that we're passing back into. So you look at our update statement. So we're going to update one row. Okay. We're going to update the row, and this is the row ID, sample ID. Okay. So because we're passing back in using the URL at the top, we're passing back in the sample ID. We also have to have that sample ID as a variable being passed in here, which we'll talk about later in functions, but ChatGPT will fix that for you for right now. Then we create our database connection. We create our cursor. And then we come back down here and we say execute, select all from samples where sample ID equals sample ID. And that sample ID is coming from right up here. Good enough. Now, we don't want this to be current runner. We want this to be current sample. Okay. So we're going to grab current sample, and all that is perfect right there. No more red lines, but we do have red lines here. So sample name, we need to paste it in and paste it in. Sample size, we need to paste it in and paste it in. ChatGPT just didn't do a very good job of fixing that. Now notice in our code, our update code, we have these little %s, %s, %s. Each one of those %s, %s, %s are one of these variables being passed here, here, and here. So every one of these you must have 1, 2, and 3. And they will be put back right back where they're supposed to be. Okay. Again, ChatGPT knows that. Okay. But if you're troubleshooting, that could be the issue. Okay. All right. And the last one is the delete sample. Okay. So that's delete sample with, and we're passing back in the ID again. And all we're going to do here is delete it. So we're going to say delete from samples where sample ID equals sample ID. And then it's going to redirect us back up to this first route. Okay. All right. So that is our entire blueprint. It's very easy code. It reads, it creates, it reads, it updates, and it deletes. And if you can do that on the internet, and you access your database in the back end, that's when you have lots of power. Okay, so let's come over and look at our samples.html, and let's make sure that all of this works too. So in the first thing, we have our form. So this is our form, and it says sample name and sample size. We want to make sure those are correct. Sample name, sample size, all this looks good. Add sample, that's our button. Come down here and we look at our table. This is the table, how it's going to look. Sample ID, sample name, sample size with some actions. All this is named right. All these are named right. And everything over here looks good. Sample, sample ID, sample, sample ID. Delete the sample, samples, delete sample. Everything looks awesome. Okay. And you'll get better at just reading this and just looking at it and just saying, does that work? So you could tell it kind of works. All right. The last thing we want to do is we want to go to our init and we want to register that blueprint. Okay. You have to register the blueprint. Okay. Another thing that we added to this init is these lines of code down here, and they are already in the one that you downloaded, so you don't have to mess with them, but they need to be in here. Okay. And so what you're going to do is you're going to uncheck this one, and you're going to say from samples, import samples, just like that. And then here, you're just going to replace that with samples, and we're going to make sure it's registered. So that blueprint can now be used. Okay. So now that we have that, we can close our init, we can close our samples, we can close our routes. In our routes, we only have in our routes the 2 routes that we have. So we need to look at our base file. And in our base file, we have runners, okay, and we'll just call this home, okay, index, about, and samples. Now, interestingly enough, I added this little nav item here, but it's samples, that's the name of the blueprint. Sample, that's the name of the first route. Okay, the name of the route. Not the name in the URL, but the name of the route. Okay, and I'll show you where that is. It's actually this name here, not this one. But keep them the same. Then you don't have to worry about it. So this one and this one should always be named the same. Okay, so this base looks like it's going to work. All right. Everything looks like it's right. So we have our samples, we have our blueprints, we have our base, our init is updated, our database is updated, and our database.txt is updated. Okay. Now let's run it and see what happens. So to run it, Python app.py. Looks like it's running. To see if it's running and see what it says, we click this little button. All right. Well, I'm going to bring it over and let's just see what it looks like. So we got home. Okay, there's our home page. We have on our about page. Good. And we have our samples page. It didn't error out, which is good. So let's add our sample name. Red ball. Sample size, large. Add sample. Okay, so it went out to the database. Now, notice I'm 127.0.0.1 sample. That means this is running on my local host. That means it's on my computer right now, running locally. It is not out on my GitHub, and it's not out on Heroku. However, the database is live. So this is still connected to the database, and it's still working on the database. Now, let's update this. And we have an error. Okay, so the update says I don't have a template called update sample. Okay. That's what we don't have. So I'm going to go over to my ChatGPT. Okay. So we'll bring chat over and we'll just switch over to Canvas and we'll say, create me a template for update samples.html. And we know this is wrong. Why do we know it's wrong? It didn't extend the base. Okay. So what I want to do instead is I grab the wrong chat. I have lots of chats open. So we'll grab this chat and close this one. And down here, we can say, create me a new template for, and it's update samples.html. And now this one does know because I was playing with this one earlier. So this is update samples template. This is a samplet template. So I can just copy all this code. Okay. I'm going to copy that code. I'm going to go back in here. I'm going to right click on my template, new HTML file. Okay. And I'm going to call it update samples.html. Okay. I'm going to click add. I'm going to replace everything in there. Okay. And then I'm going to go back to my samples. So I can close some of these down so I can see samples. And for update, which is here, I want to come down here and say, this is not update sample. It's update samples with an S. Okay. That should work. Now, let's go back and take a look at our code. So I'm going to come down here and I'm going to hit Control C to kill it. I'm going to run it again. I'm going to click on it. And then I'm going to click on samples. Notice that I closed it, I opened it back up again. First time it opened, it went out to the database and grabbed my red ball. Now I want to update that red ball. I'm going to say it's larger. Okay, click update sample, comes in and it changes out here. Okay, so that's your update. Now I'm going to do another one. I'm going to say blue ball. And it's small. I'm going to click add sample. I'm going to test it by hitting delete. Are you sure you want to delete? Okay. All right. That's it right there. That is samples. Okay. So this is the one for the sample that I wanted to show you. Okay. So this is how the CRUD we can create. We can read. That's what's happening here. It's reading it from out there in the database. We can update. And we can delete. Okay, that's our app. This is our sample app. We're